It is March 1st, 2023. The time is 10 a.m. on the dot. Thank you all for joining again. I know your time is valuable. We'll try to make the most of it this morning. As a reminder, obviously, please mute your microphones when you're not speaking. And when you do speak, please state your name so it can be recorded officially. We'll do the roll call now, Delia.
Thank you. Keisha Esqueda,
Present.
Terry Maxey, Nathan Winkelman,
Present.
On the dot.
Terry Hara,
Present.
Carlos Garza is absent today. Zeth Stevens,
I'm here.
Adam Thompson,
Present.
Wes Nance is absent. Jason Harris, presiding officer.
I'm here.
Stephen Skurlock, ex officio member.
I am here as well.
And we have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you, Delia. Approval of the minutes from the last meeting, just a little over a month ago. Does anyone have any comments regarding the minutes from the meeting? If not, I would ask that somebody motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Okay.
This is Terry Hara, second.
Okay, thank you, sir. Delia, once again, let's roll call to approve those minutes.
Yes, sir. Keisha Esqueda,
Present.
do you approve the minutes?
Yes, sorry, approve.
That's okay. Terry Maxey is still not available. Nathan Winkelman,
Approve.
Terry Hara,
Approve.
Zeth Stevens,
I approve.
Adam Thompson,
I approve.
and presiding officer Jason Harris.
I approve.
Motion passes. Thank you.
I'm told we do not have any public comments for this meeting. Is that correct? Okay.
That is correct.
Then we will move quickly into staff reports.
Sir,
First
may
up,
May I interrupt a second? Can you, we need all the board members, if at all possible, to turn their cameras on, please?
see all your beautiful smiling faces.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone. Mr. Hara, I see that you're in motion. Don't look at me. Stay safe. Try to park if you can. And don't worry about the camera. You're getting a pass on this one. I want you to
I like
park
about
somewhere.
5 minutes and then I'll be
Okay,
there.
awesome. Turn it on when you're still. Thank you so much. Be safe.
Okay, thanks everyone. Back to staff reports. The licensing division, Laura Hernandez.
Good morning, board members. My name is Laura Hernandez. I'm the licensing manager, one of the licensing managers in the licensing division for the tools team that handles the motor fuel metering and quality programs. On my report, you'll see there is some more personnel updates. Since the last advisory board meeting, we did have a new hire to our team, Maria Chinchilla. She comes from our customer service division, so she comes with much experience. And from our last meeting, our licensing division had gone from 5 to 4 teams. We have now gone down from 4 teams to 3 teams. So the different programs and different staff members were spread out among the 3 teams. And I did get additional team members with Deanna Guerrero, Jacqueline Rollins, and Karen Davis were added to my team to assist and learn the processing for all programs. The statistics are the same from the last board meeting. Our quarter hadn't ended by the time this report was due. So those statistics are the same. If you have any questions on those, please let me know. Our other current project is we are just an update on the online renewal for the invoice system. It's going really well. We've had over 150 invoices paid online. We have over 100 clients that have gone on, created online IDs, and paid their invoices. So it's working really well, and we just encourage everybody to use that online system for the invoices. And if you have any additional questions, I am here to answer.
That's great news, Laura. Thank you very much. Any questions for Laura?
This is Keisha Escala. I have a question on the invoicing system.
Mhm.
Is the only way to pay the invoice online to use a credit card?
Yes, currently that is the only way. We are continually working on enhancements, maybe for auto draft, maybe multiple payments. So we're hoping to enhance the system as we go. So right now it's just kind of a kickoff, but yeah, currently credit card is the only way.
Thank you.
Okay. Customer Service Division, Patricia Castellan.
Good morning, advisory board members. I'm Patricia, the Executive Assistant in Customer Service, and I will be standing in today to deliver our statistics. After the motor fuels program transferred from the Department of Agriculture, the expected influx of calls led into our FY22 report. This began to decrease after customers got through their first renewal, navigated the website, and familiarized themselves with the process. As shown on our FY23 report, contacts have reduced exponentially and have only slightly peaked in January, which was expected due to the holiday closure. I do want to note that customer service transitioned to a specialization process during the beginning of FY22, and after this change, calls began to route to specialized agents who prioritized inquiries for this program, which positively impacted our numbers. When we look at our top reasons for calls, the majority of them have to do with reporting an issue with a fuel pump, license statuses, and initial application instructions. That concludes the customer service statistics. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know, and I will do my best to give you that information.
Thank you, Patricia. Any questions? All right, Mr. Reed, Tony Reed, Enforcement Division. Tony, if you're talking, you might be muted.
Okay, sorry about that.
No worries. There you go.
My name's Anthony Reed. I'm a prosecutor in enforcement. I have the enforcement report. Starting with our personnel update, we're happy we're able to hire another attorney. Dax Garvin is an inspections attorney. He's got a wide legal background and should be a great asset for us. Statistics haven't changed much since we only added 2 months, so I'm not going to go through each number. If you can move down to stop sale orders and all the way down. Okay. Since December of 2022, we've issued 4 stop sale orders, 2 for diesel and 2 for premium. The Hush Food Mart has been rescinded, as well as the Sedona Food Mart. And that's my brief report. What questions do you have?
Thank you, Tony. Regulatory Program Management Division, Mr. Foskey, Tim Foskey.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tim Foskey, and I supervise the FMQ team. And I will be giving the motor fuel meter quality staff report for the Regulatory Program Management Division. Personnel updates since our last meeting in January. There's been no staff changes. We're moving on to statistics. Below, you'll find the statistics for fiscal year 2023 from September 1 through February the 8th. Along with statistics for the fiscal year of 2022 are also provided below. The current projects, recently staff have been reaching out to other states regarding their fuel quality programs. Staff have been reviewing and researching other states' testing methodologies, tolerances, and specifications for fuel quality, along with reviewing our current TDLR tolerances and specifications. We've also been several meetings with our third-party lab, Tribalogic, to review ASTM standards testing and that the proper tolerances are being applied to fuel samples pulled here in the state. Staff have spent a lot of time reviewing the ASTM standards to ensure fuel samples are meeting these standards and that the appropriate tests are being run on samples pulled here in the state. Staff has also been working with a TDLR Enforcement Division to help standardize fuel quality testing and update the fuel quality inspection procedures as well. Our outreach staff continue to assist merchant service companies, law enforcement service technicians as needed by phone or during technical inspections or by responding to emails that have been sent to the FMQ inbox. This concludes my report. Does anyone have any questions?
Hey, Tim, just curious real fast, the reach out to other states, is that more centered on trying to get updated procedures for your own folks, or what's the goal there?
Yeah, the goal is really that we're trying to make sure that, seeing kind of a little bit what other states do, what tests they're performing, what they're kind of running. We've got different blends of fuel out there, anywhere from, different ethanol grades to, bio blends to new diesels, things of that nature. We're just trying to, get with those other states and say, hey, how are y'all, handling these different types of fuels? What kind of tests are you guys running? Just so that we're kind of all on the same page and just, again, making sure that the fuel here in the state of Texas is, meets the ASTM standards.
Okay, so the focus is fuel quality, not necessarily metering.
That's correct.
Gotcha. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Any more questions? All right, I'll turn it over to Mary Winston for the Executive Office update.
Good morning, everyone. Just a brief update. As we all know, this is just a fun time of the year for the state of Texas. It's legislative session, and that's going to go on until sine die at the end of May. What has happened so far with TDLR? We have had a chance to speak before a couple of committees. We, meaning our Executive Director, Macaris Mendez, as well as Brandy Corrales, our Chief Financial Officer. Jessica Escobar would have had the chance, but they had no questions. They have been very pleased. This was Senate Finance Committee with FCIC. There was just immense bragging, and not by us. We just graciously said thank you about the way that the everything has been going on with Financial Crime Institute or Center, and we are just now watching to see the bills that are going to be filed and how everything's going to go. We have 9 more days until end of filing, March 10th, and then the work gets done with those bills. Currently, there are, and I always thank who gave me these statistics, Mr. Jeff Copas, because he does a fantastic job with keeping up with this. Currently, there are 5,354 bills that are filed. Again, we have another 9 days to continue to get more bills. Well, on top of that, we also have on our website the bills that we are following that pertain to each of the industries that we regulate. We're currently following 8 bills from both House and Senate that do relate to motor fuel metering and quality. The links to those bills, as well as a small synopsis, is found on our website. And on our front page of the website, that first page you enter, it says 88th legislative session. Click on that, and under a bolded headline is every industry that we regulate that has a bill that is relevant to it during this time period. So we have motor fuel metering and quality. You take a look at those bills and you can see where we are there and what we're following thus far. There could be more because there's typically a mad dash before the end of filing, so we will have more bills to watch before that time. Currently, again, it's over 5,000. So, communication outreach statistics. Over the past 6 months, we've had just under 100 views per day for the website, over 17,000. And most of those are from a desktop computer and almost half from a smartphone. Top reasons: they want to know skimmer reports, device performance reviews, how to file a complaint. Folks want to know about our forms, or they want to know laws and rules. Those are the top 5 reasons for visiting. This is just something that we're giving you so far to get a handle on what our website's doing. It's been totally revamped and it's continual work in process, and how it's going to deliver the information that the public and our licensees need. That sums up my report. If anyone has any questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Mary.
This is Terry here. I just have, it's not really a question. It's just an inquiry. I've heard underneath the electric vehicle charging station area that Sid is maybe wanting to take that umbrella. Are y'all, from what I understand, we're wanting to push the TDLR to take that over. Are y'all, is that going into these
Mary?
bills now or not?
I do have a little background on that, but I'm going to let Jessica take over from there as she goes into FCIC. This board is always on top of everything, which is why I really appreciate you're very engaged. Thank you so much. So I'm going to let Jess take over from here.
I'm happy to cover that one. Jessica Escobar, Chief of Staff, TDLR. I appreciate that. I'm happy to cover that further at another meeting. But by way of our legislative update, there have been a couple of bills filed that request that TDLR regulate electric vehicle charging stations as to another agency and their role in that. We do know that rules have been filed for them to regulate. We don't have a position on that. However, as with anything, law supersedes rules. So we will just follow the legislation. We are available as a resource to any members. We will be available to testify, and we will be presenting you with updates as they come along.
Yes, we just to put a caveat on that, we TDLR regulates a lot. We issue over 1 million licenses, and folks, the public, not you folks, will sometimes think that we want to take over the world. We do not. We operate at the will of the ledge, and whatever they give us, they gift it to us, and we handle it to the best of our ability. So far, we don't have final word on that, but we'll keep following.
Thank you so much for the update. I just hated not to bring it up because I was just curious. I'll follow that really close. Thanks.
Awesome. Keep following.
Thanks, Terry. Jessica Escobar is going to give us an update on the Financial Crimes Intelligence Center.
Thank you, Mr. Harris, and board members for joining us this morning. I have a brief update since we just met in January, but I do have statistics that are not final through last month, but for the month of January, the totals were $2.6 million in prevented losses. For last month, they haven't been finalized, but we're estimating that it's upwards of $30 million. Has not been finalized, but what the trends they're seeing are is it's going from the average user, you and I, being skimmed at the gas pump. Now the targets have been diesel fleet cards. Of course, the losses there are far greater than my credit card being used to buy gas or yours. So since there's an ongoing investigation, we don't have a lot of details, but basically that's what they're finding, and a significant number of credit card numbers were recovered, which is what amounts to the prevention in stop loss. So very busy, still continuing the work. We do have a cleanup bill to make sure that the FCIC has full ability to do what they are doing. And a bill has been filed to make sure that pollster tampering receives the criminal attention that it should, because right now it's a misdemeanor. So we do have a couple things pending, and that's the latest for FCIC.
Thank you, Jessica. Any questions specific to FCIC? All right, then Jessica, I believe you're going to smoothly transition into the rule revision.
Yes, sir. Again, Jessica Escobar, and we're going to be discussing rules this morning. As you remember, we discussed the rules in January, and you all as a board had some concerns and just wanted to bring them back to the work group. And what we did is we brought your thoughts, your concerns, any suggestions that you sent to us, and worked those into the draft. Specifically, the thoughts you had were not on the proposal as a whole, but on really a couple of sections of that proposal, specifically 9731, 9732, and we looked at those. So we brought those back to the work group. We looked at a couple of things, and so I will go over the whole proposal as a reminder, because that's what we're here to do, but I will focus on those. I just had a work group meeting, a board meeting on Monday, and I will advise you as I advise them. So this proposal is not final. So if you all catch a couple of things, maybe there's a typo or a word missing, or you want to make a tweak to this proposal, we can certainly do that today before we send it off to the Texas Register. It doesn't have to go to the work group. As Mary reminded us last meeting, this is not a final shot. This is us being able to get the process started. And so we can start it, and now we can be able to start taking action, give the enforcement division the ability to take action when people are not reporting. So once we get these rules adopted, you can certainly come back around and make changes. What will happen here is once they are approved and sent to publish at the Texas Register, that process will take a couple weeks from today. And then there's a 30-day comment period. Everybody will have the opportunity to submit a public comment, including you all. You can't do it as board members, but you can do it as individuals on behalf of your companies. And from there, we'll take any comments that we receive. And if changes need to be made or they're minor, we'll bring the proposal back to you with those minor changes. Or if there's something more substantive, we will bring you all of those comments. You'll receive them, and we can discuss them at the second meeting. From there, if you're happy with the proposal as it stands, then we'll send it over to the commission, and the commission will have the opportunity to adopt those rules. So that's the process. Lots of opportunity for public comment and input, because at that second board meeting, the public can comment and they can appear before you all. So just wanted to preface all of that so you have an idea procedurally of what we're looking at. But I will go ahead and now share my screen. Do any of you all have any questions about the process or anything before we get started?
I'd just like to, again, thank the work group for their efforts. I know it's not an easy process, so greatly appreciate it.
Yes, definitely. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, can everybody see this Adobe document?
Yes.
Great. So we've already discussed these, so I'm not going to go very in depth on these. Just as a reminder, we went through and we amended definitions for updating, clarification, and there were no issues previously. Same thing for adoption by reference. These were to clarify the standards that we use more specifically in proper reference. These are things that are already followed, EPA standards, and just putting them into rule for clarification purposes. Same thing on the rest of these sections. What we did was just aligning with those definitions. No changes here since our last meeting. Going to keep moving along.
Jessica, Terry Maxey,
Yes,
I have
sir.
one quick question as you're
Yes, sir.
scrolling.
Yes, sir.
The definition for merchant, I notice you've substituted for an owner or operator, and it's
Correct.
throughout that 9721 and so forth.
Right.
And one of the things that we talked about was that you have scenarios where one person owns the equipment and then another person is like leasing a facility and operates the equipment. Are y'all pretty comfortable that this addresses that? Like an owner might register the equipment, but someone that's working there every day operates it. Are we comfortable that this covers that pretty well?
So, the issue that we have is that the person who registers is the responsible party. So the responsible party is the one that needs to get the boots on the ground to meet these requirements. So if the person at the facility was registering, that's who we look to. So we wouldn't regulate whoever is at the store because they have not registered and they are not the responsible party for our purposes, based on the registration documents. So that's definitely something to consider, but for our purposes, they have not registered. We do have it listed as far as operator under statute. That is a definition, the person in control on site. So the implication is certainly that they should be complying with those requirements. However, for our purposes of enforcement division, they need to be the person on our registration documents is responsible for meeting these requirements, which is why we don't pursue any actions against, for example, a store clerk, because by way of association with that facility, the facility should make sure that they're complying. Mrs. Skeva.
Got it. So, just following up on that again, Terry Maxey, and a scenario is where, let's say I have a store and I'm an owner of a store and it's 500 miles away. And the people, the clerks that operate that store that work for a lessee of that store, these people, for example, just decide they don't want to do a log like what we're proposing in 2024.
Right.
And I don't really have any practical day-to-day control over that, but because I own the stuff and registered, I mean, how do you see that
Right.
kind of coming out? Does that become a civil matter or what exactly?
It wouldn't. And so this would be a matter, all of this would be a matter of, it would be a violation of this chapter. None of this would be a civil matter. None of it would become sent over, for example, as to the OAG or to the courts. It would be all handled internally. One of the things I can't, go ahead.
I was going to say, when I said civil matter, let me just clarify what I was saying. That becomes a civil matter between me and the guy, because the department would look to me and say, you're violating the rule because you're not keeping a log, for example. I'm picking the simplest thing, a log, right?
Right.
And
right.
so, and I'm saying, I how in the world, I mean, unless I go over there and work at the store every day, and that's not really
Right.
the business arrangement. So you're basically saying y'all would potentially fine an owner, and then an owner's got to go back and civilly sue a tenant or something. Is that basically how you see it playing out, or?
It may. One of the things that we, can certainly convey, especially to these local facilities, is we can be providing information directly to the facility, not only to as far as the rules. Passage of the rules would be not only at that top level, at that responsible party that's registered, corporate level, but down to the facility level. So we know a lot of companies, the facilities don't have they don't have an email address. We know there's a lot of turnover. So this is one of those unique programs where the paper mail is more important. And so that's something we can certainly consider putting together a handout, a flyer. I know that Tim Foskey and his team, that's one of the things they do. So not a lot of programs use collateral paper handouts, but this is one because of that outreach and education that's important. So one of the things in this program, I know we keep saying new and transfer. Realistically, we are 2 years in of transferring this program. New rules are still coming on board. So our policy is not let's get violations and penalties, and that's not the way we operate at TDLR. So the main purpose and focus that we have is compliance. So we have outreach and education. So that's the biggest thing that Tim and his staff do is, okay, we're going to come out here. This is what we're seeing. There's not an immediate direct to enforcement operation for quite honestly, the majority of these rules. So they'll educate, communicate. If we come back and we're seeing repeat times where we're still having offenses or I should say non-compliance, then we may pursue something. But if we're saying things the first, maybe second time, these are new rules. We can't expect that everybody knew they existed. So I would say, hopefully that kind of assuages your concerns.
Right. My understanding. Yeah. I mean, the approach is essentially the registered person is the one you guys are ultimately going to look
Correct.
to for the compliance. Okay. I understand. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
And that's hard. We get that, but we'll work also with the communications and outreach. His team is fantastic.
Right. Okay.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and continue on. We did not have any changes to 9729. So this one stood as presented. 9730, you all did have a request to insert information conveying the gravity of this rule, which is to say the intent is to preserve the evidence in the chain of custody. That is why it exists. We don't want you removing a skimmer because we want to make sure that case can go on. And if law enforcement wants to pursue it and prosecutors, it needs to be preserved. So we left that one. We inserted that as requested, and then the remainder of the rule stayed there.
Hey, Jessica,
So-
this is Jason
Yes, sir.
Harris.
Yes, sir.
I guess I just want to make sure I fully understand what the phrase under the direct supervision of law enforcement department means with respect
Right.
to item A. So in a scenario where you've got a skimmer, you've made the proper notifications, maybe it's within the 72 hours, maybe it's not. I want to make sure we all understand what that means, because further on in the rules, there's a prohibition about, using that position. I understand about why we put the 72 hours in there. That's great. But would verbal instructions fall under the realm of direct supervision? I'm just trying to make sure I understand.
So, Mr. Harris, I think that we discussed this internally with our RPM division, specifically Mr. Posky. So what we did is to clarify that, and we discussed this with him, with Charlotte Melder and Chris Russi, everybody within RPM. The way we wanted to address that is, we didn't want it to appear, okay, nobody called, nobody showed up within 72 hours. We wanted to make clear that 72 hours started after law enforcement and the department were notified. At that time, then they could remove the skimmer. From there, we want them to report back to us. So we're gonna work procedurally to say, okay, you've made your 72-hour notice, and now what we need you to do is let us know what that law enforcement report case number is. We know you've already told us that a skimmer is there, but the 72 hours has passed. Please give us that case number so we can take action and follow up. We can certainly add some type of clarification. For example, notify us in writing via tech info after that 72 hours has passed to say, nobody has showed up, TDLR. We're ready to go ahead and pull out this skimmer. And that's something that can meet that requirement. I think that's kind of why we went from A to B. So that may be something we can add as a clarification purpose to cover the basis of supervision or authorization, if that would make you all feel more comfortable.
Well, I do have some questions related to after the 72 hours has expired.
Okay.
But I guess specific to direct supervision, is there an assumption that that means that either law enforcement or a member of the department is on site? Is that what direct supervision means? Or could that be a phone call?
It is not. I think the intent there was not direct supervision on site because we recognized that that's why they were in the situation. We knew that they've hit 72 hours because neither law enforcement nor TDLR were available to be able to attend. So we can certainly address direct by, or we can perhaps remove direct, or which is where I advise we can change it to direct authorization or some other word to remove supervision. And then also insert that section that says, okay, you've got the direct authorization. And then in B saying, okay, if you're acting on B, then you also have that notification to TDLR saying, we're going to remove the skimmer. And here's the report number. And Mr. Harris, if I can interrupt and just let you all know, our chairman, Rick Figueroa, has joined the call. And I just wanted to let you all know and introduce him.
Hey, Jessica, thank you. Just real quick, guys, thanks for your efforts on this. I wanted to kind of bring out a couple of points, and I'll get out of your way. I'll listen where I can. I apologize for being late. Jessica alluded to this, right? This is new ground, right? We're kind of building the plane and flying at the same time with a lot of innovation opportunities. In the many licenses that we control, right? You guys are like the forefront of what I want to be, which is a collaboration of law enforcement, industry experts, owners. That whole effort has got to be cohesive. It's got to be working well. And I'm going to make it my purpose for the next 2 years, especially legislature, to develop this on other licensees. I mean, so Jessica's done a great job with the Financial Crime Center. I mean, and I realize there's no, and I say this with some hesitation, but not too much, there's no bigger impact than this committee right here for our Texans. Everybody is impacted by this because everybody gets fuel. And so, and as a fuel delivery system changes, we'll have to adapt to that. But I want to make sure that, you know, ultimately my job is to make sure the citizens of Texas get what they deserve as far as what they paid for. But the owners need to make sure that they're not encumbered by a lot of minutia and things that aren't going to work well. And so you guys communicate to us. I'll make sure the commission hears it and understands it. So as you go through these rules and regulations, I just want to make sure that they're being heard. I'm hearing it, and this development is unprecedented. And you guys are kind of, I think there's a favorite scene in the movie Moneyball at the very end, and I think the guy's being interviewed for the White Sox or the Boston Red Sox job, and he goes, "The first guy through the wall is always the bloodiest," right? You guys, for us, are the first guy. I don't know how you like that. If you like it or not, you might not like it, but you are the first guys to the wall for us. But you guys have done an amazing job, and you set the bar high. And I am expecting every other licensees to set the standard with this as far as collaboration with law enforcement, local prosecutors, industry experts, owners, and licensees, and us. So thank you for that. I mean, I just wanted to say that. I'll listen where I can, and I'm going to go off. But is there any questions you guys got for me? Any specific ask?
Terry Maxey, Mr. Figueroa, I would just tell you, you know, I can speak for a lot of my colleagues. We so deeply appreciate what TDLR has done over the last couple of years. This program has just gotten more mature. The cooperation is, in our minds, unprecedented. And we may, you know, we work through some little details here. The staff is great. I couldn't be happier with the direction this stuff is going. So I appreciate your support. Mr. Francis before you know, was great. We had an excellent relationship, and I'm real happy to be participating in this at all. It's just a really good thing for this industry, and I think for the state of Texas.
Appreciate that, Terry. Thanks a lot. We're gonna give you a raise.
All right. Double. How about double? I'll take double.
You'll take double. Whatever we're paying now, Jessica, double the salary, whatever we're paying now. All right. Any other comments? All right. I will be, I think Monday we have a commissioners meeting. I know Jessica will be there. You're always welcome to join. Just, you've got my email contact. Reach out to me if you want to go offline. Again, I need you on this. I have not the bandwidth nor the desire to dive into details of all these licensees. So what you say matters in a tremendous way. Do not expect that's where you're not being heard. You are being heard. So thank you guys for the effort, and I'll let you get back to it. Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate it.
The Jessica, Terry Maxey, the only
Yes, sir.
follow-on to that previous discussion that I have is really about between, you know, the 0 time and the 72-hour time. And that I feel like that was maybe where we were going with that, but I just want to be clear, what we're expecting people to do is, in a lot of these small towns, you're going to have someone come by with law enforcement and take a picture or something and either bag it, or they're not interested because they picked up 3 of them already, and they just take it out and start your pump up again. And I just want to make sure that we don't get anybody running afoul of an instruction from law enforcement that that's covered in this. What does that instruction look like?
So absolutely, Mr. Maxey. So the intent is, hopefully law enforcement does show up, and hopefully they come out before 72 hours. If they don't come out after you've notified them, 72 hours has passed, we don't want to continue to impede your operation of business. We want to make sure that you can take out that skimmer. If for some reason you aren't able to get a service technician out there, you're not able, you just, for whatever reason, it's the weekend, a holiday, something, we want you all to be able to get that skimmer out and you get that pump back online. So that's the intent here. That 72-hour mark passes after you've notified us, law enforcement and us, then you can take action. Hopefully they've come out before then. And so this should rarely ever come into play. Tim and his team are outstanding. And so usually by the time you've notified us, we're able to show up, hopefully within at the latest 48 hours. So hopefully this shouldn't be coming into play hardly ever, but we can certainly, Mr. Harris, look at Section A and address it if the board is comfortable to perhaps say under direct authorization or under the direction of law enforcement or the department. That might make it more clear and leave you more comfortable, because without our direction or without the direction of law enforcement, they should not be removed. So I think that's the main key, is to not be acting independently.
Sure. And so, Jason, if you've got, 10 pumps or 100 dispensers, for example, not really a big deal. Take one offline. If you've got 2 out in the middle of nowhere, taking 50% of them offline is a pretty big deal. Is there sort of a presumption of, if the sheriff moseys along and says, take it out? Is that, just document that and that's good enough? I mean, is
Absolutely.
That was my question.
Absolutely. So that would be, assuming we change A, and that would be the direction of law enforcement. From there, so then you would be complying with B. And what we need is that law enforcement case number. So you take it out, turn it over to law enforcement. And so now you've met the requirements of Section B, and we are good to go.
Yeah, case number makes sense. I understand that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But again, some of this may happen before the 72 hours.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think we all want the flexibility for law enforcement to be there and for the operators to be there as well. I think just taking direct supervision out of that might resolve the confusion. Just leave it as instructed to do so by law enforcement or the department.
Okay.
I think the only challenge related to that is, there's some potential civil and maybe even criminal issues here with removing a skimmer. That's kind of hard to document that, the sheriff told you, yeah, just go ahead and take it out.
Well, so I think the way you avoid that is complying with B. So if you're removing the skimmers, absolutely. So the key here is removing the skimmers and turning them into law enforcement. If you're removing them and putting them in a drawer and taking no further action, that's when you open yourself up to criminal penalties and actions. If you're removing them and taking them over to the local police station or wherever you're taking them to, you get that case number, you comply with all of these to the best extent that you can, and then you're letting us know, you're going to save yourself the heartache of removing that skimmer and basically risking appearing to not comply with the penal code. So once you do that, you're alleviating any concern.
So this is Adam Thompson. So I guess the main takeaway from that is reporting. Yes, there's a protocol in there, but the main takeaway is make sure you report it.
Right. So statutorily and by rule, you have to report it, but then from there, it's deliver it to law enforcement and get that law enforcement case number and provide it to us.
So I guess my question would be, would the main focus would be remove it and report it, or would it be, because we want it off the dispenser altogether, correct?
Right, right. But this would not allow you to remove it
Okay,
until someone hasn't come for 72 hours.
gotcha. So reporting them would be the main focus here. Is we found this, what would you prefer me to do with it at this point?
Right, after 72 hours if no one has showed up. But regardless, reporting is required.
Okay, so I guess then that opens the door, because we, as a calibration company, we cover, obviously, I mean, Texas alone is a large area. We're down south, let's say on the border, we find a card skimmer, we have 72 hours. Usually my guys have moved on hours and hours, miles away from that location. If they say remove it, would that, I mean, are we now liable for finding it and removing it, or can we report it to have it removed? How would we go about that?
So the way that it's written in section, because remember, this is the companion, that section is for merchants.
Right.
The merchant should never be reporting. The way it's written in the companion in 9759 for service technician is the same. They shouldn't be removing for 72 hours. Same rationale, because you're still facing preservation of evidence and chain of custody. So same issue. Should not be removing because of that chain of custody. So you may have moved on, but it shouldn't be removed until the 72nd hour.
But it would still be my tech's obligation that found it to go back and remove it when they find it something within the 72-hour period?
There is no obligation for a service technician to remove it. The service technician's obligation is to report it to the merchant
Okay.
and to TDLR. That's
Okay.
it.
Once reported, when they say remove it, anybody can remove it that's involved. That'd be the merchant mainly, would be or the cop itself or the TDLR.
Only after 72 hours. So if nobody shows up after 72 hours, law enforcement hasn't come to take it out and TDLR has not come to take it out after 72 hours, then the service technician or the merchant can take it out. Before that time, nobody should be taking it out of the gas pump.
Unless
Only
instructed
the law.
to do so
Unless
by
instructed.
law enforcement. Remember the TDR.
So
That's
Jessica,
not the
this
way
is-
it's written. It's written
is-
unless they haven't come in within 72 hours.
No, but Jessica, Terry Maxey, just to be clear,
Uh-huh.
we find a skimmer or something today at 11 o'clock in the morning. We
Right.
call law enforcement at 11:30. A couple of managers come and get involved. They show up after lunch at 2. They take pictures or something, but they've already picked up 3 of them, or maybe they took 2 of them out of the first 2 pumps, and the third one, they said, just go ahead and take that out yourself. We're good with it. Here's your case number. Then we can remove that and return that to service, and it's less than 72 hours. I mean, what the thing is, if law enforcement is cool with basically you taking it out, then they've got the documentation, built their case, whatever, then we can take it out. Is that correct?
That's not the way it's written, but if that's the way that industry wants it written, we can certainly revise it the way law enforcement requested it. In working with our law enforcement partners, it was nobody should remove it within 72 hours, which is where we had that cooperation with law enforcement. Then it can be removed, for example, by the service technician. So if that's the clarification we need, then we can look at that.
I don't know that clarification is needed. I think 9730A
A says that.
is irrespective of the 72 hours. It says you can't remove it unless instructed to do so.
Yeah. So we have
That
language
provides
in
a window
is the
for
authority.
law enforcement to instruct you to do that, regardless of the 72-hour time frame.
So I think probably that was a confusion in not writing them together, because
Right.
the intent was you can't remove them. Because if you read 9759 says you can't. So I think that there needs to be tying it together, because otherwise this seems to say 72 hours, but here it says you can take it out. So we need to just
Okay.
make sure that they are reconciled.
So Terry Maxey and Jessica, just to be clear, I would not be in support of anything that absolutely requires you to leave a pump offline for 72 hours if law enforcement has done their job.
Okay.
And this is case processed, and we've corrected the issue and move on. I mean, I think our duty to the operator is, to make this as efficient as possible. So to me, A is okay. I'm not sure. I don't like, if I were going to rewrite A on the fly here, I would not use the word instructed and direct supervision. I would say, approved by law enforcement to be removed, or law enforcement has allowed it to be removed. They no longer need it to stay in place, or something like that. That's really what you're after. You want to make sure we preserve the evidence, but then once that evidence has been preserved, processed, whatever, then there's no need anymore to keep that pump offline or impinge somebody's ability to do business.
And Jessica, real quick, if law enforcement doesn't show up, but a TDLR instructor does, who would want the evidence more? Would it be law enforcement or would it be TDLR?
If a TDLR inspector comes, we're obviously going to contact law enforcement. The TDLR inspector will take it out, and we will provide it to law enforcement. We're not keeping it. They are going to law enforcement. So we're going to work with law enforcement.
What if we have it where if the law enforcement, we call the cops and they say, yeah, we've already been dealing with that in the area, go ahead and remove it. So now we have authorization by the police officer without being on site to remove it. But now we have an obligation to submit it to TDLR and let them do what they want. Maybe have certified. Do we not want to do it that way?
No. So I think that the key, what I'm hearing from you all is, if you've gotten a directive from law enforcement and they're saying, take it out, we're not going to get in the way of that. So if they're telling you to take it out, you take it out, it needs to get to law enforcement. That's the bottom line, is it doesn't stay with you. It doesn't come to us. It needs to get to local law enforcement, and we need a case number. That's the bottom line, because what's going to happen when we get that case number, it's going to go to FCIC. We're not going to do anything with that. We're not going to keep it and make some, do anything here. The bottom line is that's going to go to FCIC, and that's going to the intent of FCIC. That's the information that's disseminated both to Steve and all the financial industry. It's going out to all of our fuel partners to say, hey, these are where we're seeing the trends. This is where we found skimmers. So that information to the law enforcement number does not die here.
We have the concept of that is good and get into that, but there's tons of small cities with one cop. There's tons of small cities that have no clue on what to do with this. It's still a new program, still kind of getting introduced. And we've had police officers saying, we don't do anything with that. Just take it off. And so
I get that, but it needs to go to law enforcement regardless. And you need to get a case number. Okay. Again, getting that report and case number to us, we are getting it to FCIC. FCIC can decide what they want to do with it. If they contact local law enforcement and they say, hey, we don't know what to do with this, even if chain of custody is broken and it is dead, it's out of play, FCIC can still get that skimmer or whatever they've got, and they can still take action on it. So it is not up to us. It's not up to you all. It's not up to the merchant to decide what to do with that skimmer. It needs to go to law enforcement is the bottom line. If we get skimmers, we're not going to decide where to take them. They go to law enforcement. That's end all be all. That is something that we can't change in this rule. And Mr. Harris had his hand up for a really long time, so I'm going to defer to him.
All I was, I think the word directed by works there, and I don't see a problem with. You have to take it to law enforcement, but not to beat a dead horse on this subject, but report it directed by someone to take it out, whether it's a service tech, but as long as it's law enforcement, and you still have to do the same thing after 72 hours.
Okay. We'll clarify that to make sure that they reconcile both here and in 9759, that you have that option with direction. But if you do take it out, this is what you have to do. If you're directed to take it out by them, by us, this is what you have to do to be in compliance for removing a skimmer. So certainly we'll address it and make sure that it's reconciled.
Sorry, Jessica. Jason Harris. One more.
Yep.
Blow to the dead horse there. Deliver to local law enforcement. Are we saying the merchant has to physically take that to a law enforcement office,
Correct.
not hold it for law enforcement?
No, I mean,
There's-
if they're coming and they're going to come to pick it up in, a day or two, great,
Here's
but-
where I struggle. That whole section basically is built off the word may, so it provides an opportunity for the merchant to remove it after 72 hours.
Right.
But then what are the obligations?
And time
You see
frame,
what I'm saying?
immediately, do we say immediately once it's in the possession of the merchant or the tech to immediately take it to law enforcement? What if they hold it for 72 hours? I mean,
so to your point, Mr. Harris, I think the intent on the may goes back to if they haven't come within 72 hours, you can take it off, or you can keep waiting. So knowing that the section A is going to change under the direction, B now becomes a shall. If you are removing based on A, you shall do all of these things if you're going to remove the skimmer yourself.
So if you're not willing or not able to physically take that skimmer somewhere to a law enforcement, then you can't remove it, is what we're saying.
Right. That is what we're saying. Because the key
So
here is
there's no taking it off, securing it, and waiting.
Well, but just Jessica, Terry Maxey, I mean, as a practical matter, wouldn't we be in compliance with this? And I understand Jason's question completely, but I take it out, the investigator is going to come by in an hour and I'm going to have him sign a receipt for it. I mean, that would be compliant.
Sure. Absolutely. We need to get it to local law enforcement. And I don't want to say reasonable amount of time because reasonable is different to different people, right? So, if it's that day, great. And they come by, the bottom line is we need that case number because like I said, that's going to FCIC and that's how they continue to build that database. That's how they continue to know who's operating what. So, certainly if law enforcement's willing to come out and pick it up, that's fantastic. But if they're not going to come out for a week, 2 weeks, they haven't come out so far, right? So hopefully they'll be coming out and it gets turned over quickly.
Right. Okay.
We get that. That's probably not going to happen in your certain major metros. So you may have to be the ones that are delivering it to the local law enforcement, but there are some jurisdictions where they will absolutely come out and pick it up, and then you're able to generate that law enforcement case number. So again, work in process. We'll see what we can. We'll see how these work out. And there's wording that we can have. Deliver to local law enforcement could be physically, or you can deliver it when they come and pick it up, right? So these are things that we can work out in practice as we go along.
Well, so after 72 hours, if unlicensed service tech, merchant employee are removing these things, I mean, the chain of custody is essentially broken regardless with respect to a criminal investigation, right?
Right, and that's part of the issue.
I guess my question would be, can we just mail it to the FCIC? Why do we have to physically deliver it to a law enforcement office?
Right, and so the local law enforcement office, we have to defer to them as the jurisdiction that has the ability to prosecute or take action. Again, we don't know what they're working on. And so some of them might be doing the same. Some of them might have a forensics lab and be working on something. We can't assume that they may or they may not. Again, with FCIC having those case numbers, they have the ability to decide how they can or will approach them. But we can't unilaterally take cases out of the jurisdiction, both from those law enforcement agencies and those prosecutors. So they need to stay locally. From there, FCIC can make that call.
Mary Winston, TLR, I wanted to add that this is really a great conversation and kind of bettering everything out. This is the kind of conversation that we've had internally and we're having, and this is great, that after today, the public is going to have an opportunity to add to the great ideas that we have come up with today. So there are things that, believe it or not, possibly that scenarios you haven't covered, but that will come to light once this is published. And again, if you have additional comments, you can again comment, not as a board member, but as a member of your industry. So for the real life scenario, Texas is so huge. I'm from a little state. I'm from Louisiana. Texas swallows that up how many times, right? So we have so many different jurisdictions that are tiny but and huge, and there are going to be these subtle nuances. I encourage everyone who's watching this or folks who are board members, tell your folks who are in the industry to watch this, to look for these rules once you guys vote them to be published, so they can make those comments and get their voices heard as well. Because what we know is until something gets out in real life, sometimes there's a scenario, it's like, darn, didn't think of that one, or didn't think it would go that way. So we kind of want to push it forward to see what we can capture from the public comments to kind of move this forward. So that's just my comment.
Yeah, Adam Thompson again. I guess that's kind of where I come from. Is we've found so many in so many smaller towns, which most common. You're catching travelers knowing that there's not a lot of coverage there, and we've had cops flat out say I don't do anything with that. And so then at that point, if they don't take it, they don't produce a report. What do we do with this skimmer? Because we're not instructed to take it off. We don't have any local, I would say local from that jurisdiction. Do we go outside of that? Do we get TDLR involved? I mean, obviously we can get TDLR involved. Can a TDL officer say, yeah, go ahead and remove it, mail it to us? Is there an alternative to the law enforcement if they just flat out refuse because they just don't know? They're not informed yet, and there's so many areas to cover. And so I don't know if we need language in there for this particular situation. Maybe it will start going away as we get more knowledge out there on this. But I just think maybe we should cover it. If not, no big deal. I think we have enough to do something with it, and we can refer back to TDLR. But it's what do we do in this case? And
Adam, I think you have just one quick thing. I think you've identified something that before Jess started speaking, and we had our regulatory program management division talking about outreach.
Mm-hmm.
And you have identified, or you are identifying, an area of outreach and education. So as you say, you think we have enough to move forward, but you have this concern, and that gives us something to address this concern. TDLR, to have that communication collaboration, letting them know what's out there so they can better handle the situations, because there are a lot of small jurisdictions. And I'm sorry, Jess, I interrupted you.
No, you're good. I appreciate that. And just like Chairman was alluding to earlier, this is one of those programs where we do have those working relationships with law enforcement. But specifically in Section A, it does give the opportunity to work with the department. So you can contact law enforcement or the department. So there are two options there. It is not just law enforcement. So we can certainly work at each scenario as they arise. I would hate to put every single scenario, just like I don't look like as a practice to put a lot of detail in the rules, because then you're bound by those level of details, and you also tend to miss situations, which by virtue of putting too many details in means that you may have specifically excluded a situation. So again, we are going to work through these case by case. I think by having the department there, we can work through things. We need to get something out so that we can see how they work in practice. If we continue to try to find the very best and capture every variable, we will not know how these work in practice. So I'm just going to leave that with you there. Again, like Mary said, we have the opportunity to take comments from the public. And so we might have things that we didn't anticipate, or maybe people think that these work. So I'm going to suggest that, and we can make those edits and
I'm good.
And
yeah, as long as they're
bring them on.
Second to law enforcement through TDLR, that would go to them anyways. And
absolutely.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Since they take it, mail it to us or whatever they require. Maybe they'll set up a day to come pick it up, but that gives us the alternative. So I don't think we need any other language there. That just,
okay.
I'm sure that was that there.
Okay, great. And I see Tony's hand up.
I just wanted to make a point. If a station tries to get law enforcement to take the thing and law enforcement won't do it, won't won't write a report, then the station just needs to document that. This is who I talked to. And if an enforcement case comes up, the investigator and the prosecutor will say, well, they tried to do what they were supposed to do. They weren't able because they wouldn't write a report, which happens a lot. I see it a lot in tow and VSF. The prosecutor's not going to penalize the station if they did what they, or at least tried to do what they're supposed to do.
Right, and we have our FMQ tech info box, and so certainly you can reach out to Tim and his team by phone, but they monitor that email box all day. And so if you're running into issues, you can email them and say, hey, we tried to do this, FYI, we ran into this wall, and here it is. And of course, they capture all those emails and put them with files. So if you're ready to move on from this section, I think we can make the change to section A, make sure it's reconciled with section B. And I will do the same for the service technicians in 9759.
So Jessica, this is Jason Harris. I just want to make sure I understand. So the goal of today's meeting is to get the board to approve the text of this proposed rule changes and get it moving along in the TDLR's process. So what are you saying as far as reconciling? Are you saying that the TDLR is going to take this language back and revise it and bring it back to the board?
So that's at your discretion. If that happened, we are looking at another month before these go out. The way that, just by way of example, because I just went through this Monday, by way of example, what you can do, because this is not a substantive or significant edit, the way it can be presented is a motion to propose these rules for publication in the Texas Register for public comments as presented with the changes discussed during the meeting. In this case, it would be 9730, A and B, as well as 9759. So any changes that we discussed during the meeting that we agree, okay, we're going to be changing this word, we're going to make sure this is a shall, those would be included in that motion, and it would not be sent for publication until those changes are made.
Okay.
But it doesn't have to come back to the board.
Right. I get it. We don't want the perfect to become the enemy of the good. We've got a process we got to get going here.
Right.
Would it be, I'm just asking a question here. Do you have a Word version of this that we could open and basically just as a board agree to any revised language? I don't want to get lost in the minutia here, but
absolutely.
there may be some value in that and spending a little more time now and speeding up the process overall.
Presiding officer, that's a great idea. And Jess is making how this normally works and how she did it on Monday. Wasn't it Monday or Tuesday? For
Monday.
Another one of her boards.
Yeah.
We move through it. We talk about everything. We get the suggested language. They're not substantive changes that you're talking about. And when the motion comes up, and Jess takes that lead on that to move these forward with the recommended changes. And so that way, and we can see them, and she's pulling it up however you want it pulled up. But that way we know that those changes are incorporated into what we have now. And
procedurally, I think you're saying we don't have to have a motion for every individual change.
Exactly.
We can talk as a board about things we want to agree upon, and then make a motion to approve all the changes that we have made.
Yeah,
exactly. And we can certainly address in the rule document, so you can see that I'm recognizing where those changes need to be. They may be further wordsmithed, so what comes out on this document may not be exact as I go through in the process, but we can certainly do it in this manner.
Okay. Do any of the board members have any objections or concerns about that process?
Terry Maxey, I think these are relatively minor changes. I mean, we just, if you want to do it now, that's fine. I agree with you, Jason. You spend the rest of the afternoon getting
well, yes, we can spend months on
We just make sure that the intent is correct, and let's move on. The intent is, you do the right thing, you report it, you don't touch it. You coordinate with law enforcement, they take it out or they tell you to take it out. If 3 days passes and nothing's happened, then you take it out, but only under these very specific procedures. You got to have a case number and you got to report it. I mean, I think all that makes good common sense. And we should make sure that that's reflected in that A part particularly.
Right. So these would be your changes that we're discussing.
I would just say unless instructed to do so by law enforcement or the department.
Okay.
I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know if anybody has any strong feelings about that either.
Okay.
It kind of makes it simple. I think somebody said, Terry, you had a concern about the word instructed. Did you want to go with directly?
I don't think that's very material
Yeah.
to this. I mean, you need to have an agreement with law enforcement that you're okay to remove it, whether you can, instruct. I don't think, I can't imagine they're going to come after us for that. I mean, as long as law enforcement on site, you got a case number and, I just can't see that being the issue. The key thing is to preserve the evidence. That's the intent. So I think we're in pretty good shape here.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and go through and make sure we've cleaned this up. I think for clarification purposes, nothing really needs to be changed here. They still need to provide those things. I think Tony has kind of covered the fact that if you don't have a law enforcement case number, you could document that and provide that in a manner prescribed. So manner prescribed, you don't have it, you can let us know why. Tony?
Yeah, I keep looking at the word sterile for the gloves. Do they really have to be sterile?
They do, and I was provided that by law enforcement, so I am not inclined to change that language. That was provided to us by FCIC. So to the extent we can at least maintain the integrity of the skimmer, it may not meet the chain of command, but to the extent we can maintain the integrity of the skimmer, they would like to be able to do so, any fingerprints, anything like that, and this would allow them to do so. So basically not using some gloves that you're using to, work on the hoses or something else like that.
Jessica, Terry Maxey, just for clarity, you have the 72 hours crossed out on B.
Right.
It was if nobody does anything in 72 hours and you can take it out using this gloved procedure, right? That's the intent.
Right. If you notify us, then you can do it. So we can certainly keep both of those. I guess we can keep both so that if you're not instructed, then you can take it out. I guess that's definitely an option.
That makes sense to me.
To keep it out or add it back in?
Well, don't you just need a timeline after you notify? I could notify you, and if you're not here in 5 minutes, I'm ripping it out. That's not what we need to have happen.
Okay.
So my understanding was always, I personally think 3 days is a little long. I understand weekends and holidays. Y'all want to have that. So if 72 hours is a deal, within 72 hours and the merchant is notified, I think what you got there is about right. I mean, Jason, isn't that okay on B? What she's got there?
Yeah, let me think through the changing it from discretionary to mandatory though. Want to make sure that all of the potential scenarios are covered. This doesn't become too burdensome.
And this is one of those.
It would be may remove, the skimmer. The intent is to return the device to service. Anyway, I think we can just,
So if I can interject, I certainly understand the intent of the board on both of these sections. And so this is one of those times where editing on the fly doesn't really work.
Sure.
So it would probably take me a good 30 minutes, quite honestly, to just draft these couple of sentences. So if you'll give me the grace to go back and do these, I know the intent of keeping the 72 hours, but also allowing under the direction of law enforcement. And so it may need a tweak to both of those, but based on our discussions and on this draft, it's clear that a change needs to be made to both of these sections. So if a motion is made, then this one will be edited,
Okay,
as well as 59.
I'll be sure to stipulate that when.
Okay.
And I think Adam said, as long as the intent is there, or am I giving you credit that you didn't say? But as long as we have that, the correct intent, and Jess will making sure everything lines up.
And Jessica, just to go back to number 3 right there, drop off to local law enforcement. There's nothing that needs to be in here if they're saying that that's not, I'm trying to say this, that they declined to pick it up. Obviously, we want to get their name and get the report and get everything that it was tried to give to them. Is there something in here that says it is okay to mail or get with or send to TDLR? Because if you're out in, on the border, you can't obviously take it to TDLR. So delivering to TDLR, can we mail to TDLR? So I guess, do we need language in there that says, if none of this works, we can do this, there is authorization in code to do this? Or is that going to be a case by case and we don't have to have that in the rules or the law?
So, so Adam, I think that let me confer with FCIC. I think the preference is not to include that, because then you're going to see, we had a one-off, and we're going to have a situation where nobody will take it. So, you're already going to have this communication. You've got a very open line of communication with the RPM team. And so as situations arise, let's talk. Let's see what they have to say. They can maintain communication with FCIC, and we'll go from there. And so again, like I said, it's better to not try to anticipate every situation and put it into the rules. Rather, it's just too detailed. So again, we've got that open line of communication. That might be our best bet. And we can always come back later.
Yeah, no, that works. I didn't know if we needed an alternative language, but fair enough. The language specifies that. And if we're a case by case scenario, we don't have to detail that out versus we have law that specifically says what to do. Obviously there's going to be scenarios, but we know what to do for the most part.
Right. Correct. Okay, let me just make this note likewise over here, because it will be the same thing. All right, so let's go. Do we have anything else on this section before we move on, or does anybody need a quick break? No? All right. So this was the next big section that we discussed, was 9731. The consensus from everybody was to go from mandatory security labels to 2 or more security measures. The way it was written was intended to be EMV compliance, was not conveyed to you all. So these are the suggestions we got, and I think hopefully meet industry language and speak. So 2 or more of these must be implemented. Of course, the or more is because some of y'all have these already. Maintains the locking mechanism for the to replace universal locks. You can certainly use temporary evidence seals. That one is still on there, but it is an alternative to, it's no longer a mandatory. Again, we know some of you all are already using these. The physical locking system to protect that financial transaction compartment, that is now one. Installing devices and sensors to lock down the system if there's unauthorized access or attempts. And then we've got retrofit, upgrade, or replace for EMV. The key here that we added was enabled. One of the things that we're hearing from FCIC specifically is that some facilities are installing EMV, they're not enabling it. And so what that means is you're putting in your card and it's still able to be skimmed because they have not enabled the EMV. So while some merchants are able, you go in and it locks in your card, and I know some of you all have that, not all do that. So you may put in your chip card with the EMV, it will not lock in your card. That means it's not enabled. And so it should be, if the EMV is enabled, it will lock in your card and not release it until it's done. So not everybody has their pump EMV enabled. So that's the key here. It's not enough to be EMV compliant. You've got to be enabled.
Jason, real quick, Gilbarco, doesn't Gilbarco have an EMV? Isn't the, oh, I can't think of the name of it, but aren't they still the black ones that don't lock it in? It still reads the chip, but it doesn't lock down. Don't y'all have a few of those out on y'all site as well?
We don't, but I think that piece of hardware does exist out.
Yeah, so
It's an example, Adam, whether it's enabled or not. I'm just
Right.
using it as an example.
okay.
If it's enabled, great, but it's an example that I was given. So if the merchant knows it's enabled, then it's enabled. We're not going to use that as a test case. So we just need to know that they've met that requirement. The final one is installing these high resolution videos or lighting. And those are the requirements if you're going to install the video or lighting. So there's got to be minimums to that if you're going to meet those requirements. So 2 or more of these to meet the security requirements to protect consumers. Any thoughts or suggestions?
Jessica, Terry Maxey, I have a few thoughts here.
Okay.
I was not, I know that there was some talk about 2 items last time. I was not personally, I wasn't, bought into the, you needed to do 2 things. I think that was talked
Okay.
about. So I was not a fan of that. Of course, I can be beaten into submission here. I'm open, but I want to, to me, first of all, I compliment you on the language of number 5. I mean, I think it's thorough, and I think the compliant and enabled are key things. My experience has been it does lock the card. I'm not sure, there may be something else, but I think you're on the right track with all of that. My question is, if you do number 5, why do you need to do any of the other things? And here's the thing, if we don't need to make rules just for the sake of making a rule. I mean, it needs to have a purpose and an economic benefit to it and everything else. And so I'm not clear, and I'm open to being convinced, but I'm not clear why, if you do, like what we want to have happen is we want everybody to invest in technology, which is quite expensive, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars a site in some cases, to make these things not susceptible to skimmers. We just spent 20 minutes, fine tuning language about skimmers, when in reality, you're coming to a narrow and narrower group of locations that are even going to have a skimmer. I can tell you we had many skimmers before we upgraded. I'm not aware of a single incident we've had in the last 3 years since we've replaced our pumps, not a single one. Other people on this call have a lot more pumps than I do, so they may have a different opinion. But my question is, if someone makes the investment in their business and does number 5, why do we want to, just for good measure, just go an extra mile? I'm not clear on the logic of that.
Hey, Jessica, this is Jason Harris. I can speak to that just a little bit. I'll let you continue if you don't mind. Terry, I think it's kind of a dirty little secret. I'm about to divulge it, but the skimming purpose is to get the magstripe data. EMV, using the chip card to process payment, doesn't remove the ability to skim the magnetic stripe data. So I think I'm just putting thoughts in the folks that developed this section. That may be the reason why it needs to go beyond item 5. There's still an ability to skim.
But if you do item 5, then your pumps will shut off if they're tampered with, which is really what you want to do anyway. You want to prevent a transaction. All the tape and all the cameras and all that are designed to, catch it after it's been done. If you've done everything to prevent the pumps from being able to be tampered with, putting a lock on it, for example, is an example of a preventative measure, then I'm not really sure, why we're going to tell people you need to go spend thousands of dollars on tape or something like that. And I don't want to be the fly in the ointment. It is just not clear. I mean, I think in my suggestion to you, Jessica, I had said you either do number 5 or pick 2 of the things other than that. That was my suggestion, because I just didn't see the logic in it, but.
Right. And I know Mr. Skurlock's got his hand up, but if I can interject as far as the background on that, unfortunately, skimmers are now getting installed on the EMV compliant gas pumps. and going back to the mag stripes, but also the overlays. So we're seeing overlays on pumps, and whereas something that we were talking about 2 years ago happening in Europe is now happening in the US. So I think we've seen one so far in Texas, but it's on the way. So are we putting something in for, you know, a few cases in Texas? Maybe, but it's also kind of a preventative measure, and I'll defer to Mr. Scurlock now.
Thank you, Jessica. Steve Scurlock, and I appreciate all you guys, by the way. I've learned a lot about your business sitting here and listening. Terry, I get it, and we have been pushing for action, obviously, for a number of years, and I think we're on the cusp of making that happen. I don't know if there would be any efficacy in looking at an amendment, if you will, to number 5 to basically say that, you know, if one or more of these other requirements are there. I mean, if you've got new EMV compliant pumps, and I'm saying the wrong terms, I'm sure, but it's good. You're going to have a unique lock, and you're going to have, as you said, an auto shutdown, and you're going to have a number of things based on the fact that it's newer technology. So in my estimation, there are steps that have been taken that would be inclusive anyway. So to me, you would be compliant if you had that. And I think, you know, on the number 1, as long as you don't have a universal locking mechanism, and if you buy a new pump, you're not going to, unless I'm mistaken somehow. So, you know, again, we want efficiency and effectiveness, but not necessarily burden. So I don't know if that would fix that issue with a sub I or A or whatever it might, an A or a B. But you know, to me that would make some level of sense, and I get it. But I'm thinking probably your pumps, if you go down the list, you guys have all this stuff or most of it anyway already. Is that, am I mistaken in some way?
Adam, Terry Maxey, Adam, I mean, are the locks not still, I mean, there are probably a few different key codes, but you're not getting any, unique keys for every installation or every dispenser, every installation, are you?
Well, but is it, again, I speak from some level of ignorance, but I do try to listen. I think the issue is, are there keys you can buy on the dark web or through other nefarious sources that will allow you to go unlock a fuel metering device or dispenser or whatever we're calling it?
I think the answer to that is always going to be yes. And so one solution would be, well, then go replace all the locks. So that's 2 locks per dispenser, and you got 10 dispenser locations. That's 20 locks at $300 a piece. So you're talking about somebody spending thousands of dollars per location. So while it is simple to say, just replace your locks, if it was just 1 lock, it would be fine. But I think that is a very expensive proposition that someone would have to justify. If you have to do 2 of these things, you're going to do number 5 and you're going to use the tape. That's what's going to happen. I just don't see any other way around it. And
Terry,
I question the efficacy of tape at all, frankly.
Sure. Terry, this is Jason again. That was, I totally hear you, and I don't disagree. The comments that I made were specifically geared towards providing as many options as possible to merchants, so that the flexibility was there, to assess each one specific to their particular location, and what's the least costly and what works best for them. I appreciate your comments. I think to speak to Steve specifically, you can still buy an EMV compliant dispenser right from the manufacturer that still has universal locks on it. These are all additional options that the merchant would have to add to increase security.
So, Jason, I mean, I guess the question is, are you, well, Adam, I mean, is it, first of all, is it true or not that when you buy a new dispenser from Gil Barco or Dresser Wayne or somebody, they have somewhat of a universal key, right? I mean, every pump doesn't come with its own unique key, or have they changed
Correct.
that? Or
Every standard dispenser that still rolls off their assembly line has the same key that they've
Right.
had for 20 years or more.
Right. And has anybody replaced those? I mean, has anybody ever, gone in and said, I'm going to change the lock on all my dispensers and hope
Oh,
the
yeah.
clerk doesn't lose the key? I mean,
Yeah.
and how much is that
Several
cost?
retailers.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, it's last time I checked, it was
It's
like
not-
$285 per dispenser or something.
no,
Yeah.
it's not that much.
Yeah.
Terry, just speaking from experience,
Okay.
it's not inconsequential, but it's not
Right.
280.
Okay. But
So-
there's some amount of money. Yeah. Okay.
So as a question, you've upgraded your pumps. So for somebody, for example, that has bought new gas pumps or upgraded and retrofitted with EMV, and yours happen to also have these monitoring shutdown devices. So now you've met both of these requirements. Would that be the case? And so, or are you thinking that does not? Are you
Well,
concerned that doesn't cover that?
If what I put in my language that I shot over to you, Jessica, was
Mhm.
that the operating system in existence at the site controls the pump such that they would automatically shut down if they're tampered with. And
Mhm.
by operating system, we mean the passport or the register, the way, whatever. That's all this stuff is on a big network, and if
Right.
so it sort of yes, but I think that in my mind, the EMV, if you do number 5, you have, because that software that is in there does that, number 5, you've done it. And I guess what you're saying is if you do number 5, you've also done number 4. Is that kind of
Correct.
the
That's what
idea?
that's what I'm getting to is if
Okay.
you have number 5, does it also do number 4?
Okay, then the
Correct.
only question I'd have about number 4 on the, from, kind of wordsmithing the language is it says install and maintain, and you're not really installing anything. I mean, you're just, software is sensitive to it and will do it for you. It's a software fix basically. And
Terry,
I don't know, again,
just
go ahead, Jason.
speaking from my point of view, I don't know everything about this, so I'm going to give you what I got. I think the distinction is the EMV components themselves are required to have advanced detection and sensing capabilities to deter skimming or access. And
Right.
that component will shut down if it detects a tampering or one of the other,
Mhm.
things that it's trying to detect.
Mhm.
It is possible for a merchant to have an additional system that intakes that alert data from the individual components and further disables the entire dispenser, you name it, which I think would leak into item 4 there. So I don't know what your system does or what, how it performs. I think if we're talking about just like the card reader itself throwing a CR error because there's been tampering detected, I don't think that speaks to what number 4 is really asking for, which is for either physical door sensors, or I guess you could argue if your point of sale system takes that data from the EMV components and does additional things, being alerts or shuts down the entire dispenser, that sort of thing. I think you could make an argument that you've met 4 and 5.
Well, and that, to me, that's what I would be thinking to get to. If you have a merchant, a retailer, an owner that's invested the money in the best technology, and we want to make sure we're not making them do something that is a waste of time and money, and just for the sake of doing something. But I guess that's.
Presiding officer, I'm sorry, Mr. Maxey. We've gone quite a bit, and I want to just take a little break right here, if that's okay with you, Mr. Harris.
Yes, perfect.
Everybody just kind of review to yourselves. We'll come back to you. And Jess, she needs a sip of water, guys. So let her just give us a few minutes. We're going to take, let's take 10. Okay. And if that sounds good with you, and of course, Jason, you have to give us that official call. And
right.
I do know that Mr. Hara has his hand up. Mr. Hara will catch you after the break, but let's just take just a little bit of break.
Thank you, Mary. Yep, please return at 11:45. think we were discussing 97.31. And Terry Hara has his hand up. Terry.
Yes, I just wanted to say that, we, as a board, we worked, or as an on the committees, we worked really hard to this section. And I think that we've done a great job with protecting any operator that needs to have some, I guess, some latitude on what they choose to do. I'm a lot like Mr. Maxey as well with our company. We've installed electronic door security. So that clicks one, and next thing you know, we have also EMV, which is, enabled. So that clicks too. So that gets us out of it. So anybody that has spent the money to do things correctly, you're covered on this. And we've also given the people that doesn't have EMV yet, some options with door locks, which doesn't work, or tape, but we're not hindering a business from being able to operate, but we are trying to make it secure. So, I don't want to keep beating a dead horse on this. I think that all these items are, my opinion, anyone can meet two of these items without a big burden. That if you're going to keep operating, and taking credit cards, the other option is just don't take credit cards outside. So I just wanted to say that, I think that all the wording is good here.
Terry Maxey, if everybody's agrees that number 4, you've achieved that. If your system, your EMV compliant, whatever, shuts the dispenser off, if it's opened or tampered with, and that checks number 4, then I have no objection to any of this, as long as y'all are set, comfortable with the language on it and everything.
Well, Terry, I don't know what your system does. This is Jason Harrison. I think it'd be incumbent upon you to make sure that whatever system you have in place does in fact meet how it's worded here for number 4.
Yeah, this is Adam. Adam, when you unplug an EMV card reader, it disables just the card reader, and you have to come back and reactivate it. Same thing if you unscrew it. So are we talking about just the card reader? Or are we talking about shutting the whole pump down? An alarm system, I don't know of a POS that would do that, but an alarm system would shut the whole pump down until somebody comes back. So does this 4 cover just the card reader if somebody was to unplug and plug back in, or take the card reader off and it deactivates it? Or are we talking about shutting the whole pump with a security system or something? I guess that's where Jason is coming from, is which one suffices to number 4? Because there is 2 different components that we're talking about.
So I'll answer quickly, but I know that Mrs. Skeva and Mr. Winkleman have had their hands up since before the break. But the way that it's written, it says the device. The device is the entire pump. It's not just the card reader. So it's the whole pump. But I'm gonna let Mrs. Skeva speak. She's been waiting quite a while.
Thanks, Jessica. So Keisha Skeda with Flint Hills. Would some of this be solved if, and I don't know if this is true, is the EMV compliant system superior to these other options? If it is, then if you have EMV, you don't need anything else. But if you don't have EMV, then you need 2 of the others from the list.
Keisha, this is Jason. I'm going to attempt to answer that question. For me, I think the key factor is, as long as there's magnetic stripe data on a credit card, you're going to have an ability to skim it. Whether or not you've got EMV compliant components, these are all options for increasing security. I don't think, this is an arms race. We're obviously increasing our technology and trying to stay up ahead of the criminals. But again, as long as that magstrip data is on there, that's what they're after.
But the tape is fairly, I think this makes this okay, because that tape being one of the options is a fairly cost efficient way to be one of these securities. And like you said, most of them are EMV. And if you didn't spend a lot of money doing the EMV, then replacing the locks or security will compensate for that, and the other side to protect your cartridge from there. So I think I'm okay with all this simply because we have the tape, and then you have the option of go EMV or not EMV. So from what we see in the field, touching every dispenser, I'm good with that. And I think that's kind of what we landed on, giving so many different options to take the ability of one or two. I mean, because other states, we've worked in, I think, 15 different states, and some of these states are requiring an alarm system, requiring you to change your locks and not having manufacturer locks. So it's kind of lenient from what other states are requiring. And I guess from where we're at, what TDLR is doing is being very, very non-strict, considering the alternatives.
Mr. Winkleman, did you still have something for us?
No, I was just going to just echo the other comment that I totally agree with all this. I think we've more than enough have covered the two possible options that people can go, and it's just everybody's going to be on their own level of what they had or how much they want to protect. So I think we're adequate here, in my opinion. That's just.
Okay, so and I will say, based on the suggestions via email and from our last meeting, that is where the language came from, and that's where the two or more came from. I do know, Mr. Maxey, that you had given me the EMV consensus was the two or more, which is why I revised to use this language. So as a whole, are you all okay with the revised section?
Hey, this is Jason Harris. The only concern I have is a very minor one, but the language on number 3, I just want to make sure it's distinct enough from option 1. I think what we're talking about there is additional physical security devices that might be outside of replacement of the standard door lock.
Okay, so would it just be enough to say, to just take out this section, just say a physical or revise this section?
I'm not sure. It's almost like it's another physical security device. So maybe install additional physical security, other physical security. I don't. Anybody else might have an opinion.
I'm good with the way it stands.
Okay, that's definitely an option too.
Okay.
But if it's, Terry, if it stands as it is now, this would be an additional physical lock to the locks referenced in number 1. Would you agree to that?
Well, I believe if it's where it's at, if you have a lock, or we're saying that you can do additional measures to meet the lock, or this, or another way of securing the device. And I think that the reason that we did that when we were talking about it on the advisory board was some people actually don't change the lock. They build a metal cage and go around high flow dispensers. So that's where the additional security device goes, is that maybe it's not a lock, but you have to prove that you built a cage around, you've done something to keep them from getting into the dispensers, is why I think that we should probably leave it the way it is after hours of discussion the last time. But you know, I'm good to do either way. But I mean, I think everything is really covered here. And if we want to take out that and put in something about, you know, or I think we just didn't want to use homemade device, but I know we have some high flow dispensers that aren't quite where they should be. So we get pulsers all the time, Jam. So we've built cages around them, and takes us 6 hours to open them up to just even change a filter. So, you know, we'll upgrade those as we go, but that was some way to just to keep people from damaging our pump and jamming pulsers.
Yeah, if everybody agrees that the current language is sufficiently different, then I'm good. I said it's not a major concern for me. I just want to make sure there's enough distinction there.
Terry Maxey, not 100% sure number 4 is perfect, but I mean, I think it's pretty good. And, I think you could, as long as I could, our pumps do shut off, for example. I needed to check while we were on the break. And when I say the pump shut, I mean the pump, I would just say this, Jessica, is a very complex device. There are parts of it that are underground, parts of it are networked into the store. So probably a little bit interpretive there. The thing is disabled where it ain't going to work when somebody, messes with it. I mean, that's the idea. And I feel pretty comfortable about that. So I'm okay with it. We still use tape. Actually, I checked on that. We spend hundreds of dollars a year on the tape, and we use it only in certain locations, and things. So yeah, I think that we're in relatively good shape on all of this.
Okay, Mr. Winkleman. Good? You're on mute.
Hey, Nathan, you're muted. There you go.
There we go.
Nope. Mr. Winkleman, we didn't get that last comment.
No, I'm
There you go.
good. I'm sorry. I didn't realize I had my hand still up.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Okay. So we will keep moving ahead. If knowing the background to restricting the actual device itself, what we can do is just remove this section and just saying restricts access to the device. Device is actually the mechanism inside of it. And so this would clarify it's the whole unit. It's a commercial weighing measuring device. So this would broaden the definition to say if you have that locking mechanism, where you're covering the front, it would be to that, and not only that, basically the card reader or any section there. So just caught that one if that's what the intent was that you're specifically speaking about.
I don't know if this is Jason. I don't know if you're addressing that to me. I would lean the other direction. I would leave that component of that line like that, because ultimately that's what we're trying to protect. I think changing that might confuse, the various different compartments of the dispenser. You've got the hydraulic cabinet underneath, that's
Sure.
different from what we're trying to do here with this room.
Got it. We'll leave it as is. Okay, so then we're going to leave this section with the exception of making sure this is clean. There will be no edits to section 9731. Correct?
That's fine with me.
All right. So 9732, we talked about the inspection logs, just clarified you should be going out. This is something your staff probably does on a daily basis anyway. Go out, just check things out. There was a clarification, a suggestion here to, previously it said, look for damage to the actual dispenser. Revised it to say you're looking for external damage, but really the bottom line is you're looking for unauthorized access or appearance of tampering. So if there is that tampering or access, then that's when you call either your licensed service technician or someone with that knowledge to identify a skimmer. Previously in the rule, you remember it said inspect for external damage, and if there's damage, you need to call a service technician. It's kind of not open for interpretation. So there's a little bit more discretion here. And then the and is if you've got the security labels, you need to replace them immediately. Still same requirement as far as the log. All you have to do is have somebody with the name and initials and the date and time they were out there. Not any different really than your maintenance log. So if somebody's out there walking around, you sign it off. It's a very thin and simple log. There's no prescription as to whether it needs to be a writing, electronic, however the merchant decides to do it. Maintenance logs stay the same.
Hey, Jessica, sorry.
Yes, sir.
9732A1C. I think that might be a relic of when we had the tamper evidence security seals as the only requirement for increased security. I think the the directive to replace missing or damaged, that's already covered under 97.3. I'd be an advocate for removing C altogether.
Okay.
Just putting that out there for discussion.
Oh, okay, that's fine, because we have that covered in 2, replace with perforate or damage. That's totally doable, and we can change this to and.
Anybody have concerns with that?
No, that's fine.
Got it. Done. Maintenance log, this was remains the same. If you've got somebody who is contracted, works with you, and they are actually opening to access that device, they need to sign on this log. This again is really for protection of you, but also for tracking down for purposes of law enforcement, knowing, okay, there was a skimmer, who was the last person there, kind of gives a little bit of background. That's not to say that the person that last touched that device is the one that put in a skimmer, but it gives a little bit of background and information. So that is the same there. So,
Can I jump in on that real quick? And this kind of goes on to what Terry Maxey was saying. There's a lot of stations that we work at that the gas station or the store doesn't own the dispensers. So can that be an electronic sign on so that they have access to it and that we're doing that? So can we do it as some kind of electronic, and does it need to be specified that it can be electronic as well? That way we would email, let's say we're working for Terry's company and we say, hey, we've opened this up, blah, blah. And now he has an electronic log of who did what at his dispensers when he can't count on the store to do that. So I think that would kind of help that out, but do we need to specify that as well?
we don't need to indicate whether it's written or electronic. We have that in some of our other rules for record keeping, which is why we don't prescribe how it needs to be maintained. But as a reminder, if you've got staff even going to open up and put in paper or do any other type of thing, opening the gas pump, they need to still be signing on that log. So if they want to do it electronically and have whoever they're working with in their service company, then that's totally fine, as long as a copy of that can be provided electronically to us upon request or law enforcement.
And just for
yes, sir.
And Terry Maxey, just for
Yes.
clarification, I'll make sure I'm tracking everything. The logs, like all of these rules, will go into effect January 1st of next year. Is that correct?
So we can add that to this section. The January 1, 2024 was specifically for the maintenance. The security section. It is not for this section. If that is something that you'd like, that we can certainly do by way of, again, going back to education, we can certainly put a January 1, 2024 on this section as well.
Okay, just to follow up on that, I would encourage putting some kind of date on it because it's a little bit of an event to change the behavior at retail stores, and I think I would try to be a little bit more specific about it. I think the notion you talked about being electronic or whatever gives people an opportunity to figure out how they can best do it. But I'd definitely give some lead time. And then you mentioned earlier about education and the outreach that the department does. Things like, here's a sample log. If you don't know what to do, here's one. I mean, things like this, so that people can be confident they're complying.
Absolutely. And Chris and his team are fantastic at working on, they have some great data people. They've got some people that can put together different spreadsheets and things. And so I'm sure we can put something together electronically on our website that you all can have access to to download. And so certainly we can put that implementation deadline. There's a couple of things that we can add that for. Not only for this rule, for employee training as well, as one that we should be adding it to as well. So make sure we also have time to put in a training program. So we might have a little longer with that by way of leeway. And I know Tony had his hand up.
Yeah, just it doesn't look to me like the log requires they say what they did.
Right.
And that would be helpful.
So it does not, and that is not necessary, and that wasn't requested by law enforcement. The reason that they don't need to know what was serviced or what was done. So our service technicians already submit they submit device performance reviews to us online. So it's not that we need to know what they were doing in that pump. What we do need to know is who was in there. And so that was the purpose, is for law enforcement only. We don't need to know what activities were performed.
Okay, it would just be helpful when enforcement's trying to find out when something was fixed or not fixed.
Yeah,
And
what
Adam, if I can jump in, hold on. So the merchant as well as the service technician will have copies of those reports from that they've performed service. So the intent of this is not to show you what was fixed or repaired. If there was a request to review something, a remediation, a repair related to a fuel quantity issue, the suggestion would be to reach out to the merchant for a copy of the service technician's report, which would be entirely separate from this, which would be detailed. To add that to this would provide unnecessary information to law enforcement that they would not need. And so they could provide much more detail in the service technician's report that's provided to the merchant.
Okay.
Jason, I'm sorry, Mr. Harris.
That's okay. I'm trying to be good about using my hand instead of just talking, so thank you. We're requiring quite a bit of prescriptive information here from the service providers. I guess I had a question for, I guess Adam is the sole representative at this stage. I mean, does the average technician know their license number and their company's license number?
We require that on our paperwork. So they're documenting, and actually we're building a program that when they have the address and it's a Texas, Alabama, whatever address they are, it will automatically fill in their company license for that state and their technician license if not there. So they have access to it. I don't know if they know it by heart, but we do keep a copy of them in the folder. So I'm not sure.
I'm just trying to think through each of these practically, just living it through understanding.
So Mr. Harris, they do need to know those numbers because when they submit those device performance reviews to us online, they are tied to their service license number.
I understand that gets included typically on the back end. I'm just, the merchant's going to be asking the guy standing in front of them, hey, I got to fill out this information.
Yeah.
You know, if they don't readily provide it, then we can't achieve what's required of the merchant. You know, there's a lot of prescriptive requirements on what the merchant has to do here, but there's nothing requiring the licensed technician to provide that information.
Right. So the onus would be on that service technician to fill that out on the log, right? So it wouldn't be the merchant providing it. The service technician would be required to put that on there. So I get what you're saying as far as what if they don't have that, and so then the merchant has the gap. But it would be the service technician that would have to be signing in on that log and providing that information.
Then I would want that to be clear in the rule.
Okay.
Because right now, the way it's written is, you know, the merchant's on the hook for any of that missing information, in my opinion.
Okay. Got it.
I mean, maybe I'm splitting hairs, but
I'm
just practically, I'm putting myself in the shoes of you know, the average general manager of the store.
Sure.
Trying to comply with the requirements, but not having access to the information that is necessary.
Absolutely.
The company's the one that's required to submit the DPR. So as the technician would know his license number, but may not know the company license. They write all that on our paperwork.
That's if they're doing a DPR. Here, we're talking about, you know, other means of accessing a dispenser that might be separate from a DPR. Any service or maintenance that's done.
But they would need the company and technician license to fill out this log, correct?
Yes. That's what it indicates is we would want, if you're employed by a service company, we want to know that service company's license number. Because if we get, you know, a half a name of the, you know, a shortened name of the service company, it may be hard for us to track down that name because we don't tie service technicians to a company. So we may not know who they're there with. So that was the thought process behind asking for that license number.
And I get it. Yeah, totally understand that. And I think what I've heard is, you know, TDLR's open to, as long as this information is recorded in some fashion. It doesn't have to necessarily be on a specific paper log, correct?
Absolutely.
So most of you will have a work order system of some kind, I assume, that documents a lot of this information. And I think what Jessica's saying is the TDLR is open to that being the documentation of the requirements of this rule.
Absolutely. Yes. It's just being able to maintain and capture that information. So that's the intent there. Any other thoughts on 9732? Mr. Hara.
All I wanted to add is that, you know, you're not always going to be a licensed TDLR person working on the
Correct.
dispenser. So that's the reason that language, I think, is in there, so that you could put down the service company that replaced a card reader, or, you know, it could have even had to replace the nozzle because you had to open the door to trip the shear valve. So it's not just someone like Adam's group that's performing work on this that we're trying to capture. So I think it's worded to capture that.
But they would still need to know the company's license number they work for, though. Even if they're not
The
licensed.
company's not going to have a license, Adam, to go with the TDLR to work on a weighing dispenser. Now they'll have a weighing technician's number. Some service companies will not have a construction number from TCQ. Our maintenance guy, you know, unless we're touching the meter or the metering device, they're not licensed through the TDLR. So, but we're wanting, I think the objective of this was to say, if you opened a dispenser to work on it for whatever reason, we want to capture that, but you're not necessarily going to have a license number through the TDLR.
Right, which is where the request is for driver's license.
Gotcha. Okay.
Correct.
So able to kind of tracking either way through a license
Either one.
or a driver's license number, but you still want a company they work for regardless?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if there's service company, but that's a good point. If it's not a service company, we can certainly say employer.
Well, I think it's actually worded right, because it says the name of the service company and the service company's license number if the person is service sufficient. So I think it's covered.
Okay. Okay.
And Mr. Maxey.
Just a quick question for clarification, and I'm thinking about the practicality of implementing this at retailers and stuff. The maintenance log, and I'm just picking up on this, the maintenance log and the inspection log are two separate logs.
Correct.
And is the department going to have issue with them just simply being one log? I mean, it's just two things instead of one thing from a retail perspective, or?
No, they can certainly be one. We're just looking to make sure that the requirements are met. So you're inspecting daily, and then if somebody's coming out and opening that dispenser, you're capturing who that is. So if that information is maintained for the year, like the record keeping says, then that is fine if all of it can be maintained in one location.
Got it.
Jason brought up a good point. He said if you're using a dispatching system like Service Channel or these different ones, that's a log that dispatches, and then the technician checks in and checks out. But if they're not able to check in and check out while there, and then they turn paperwork in, and then the office has to close the ticket out, that could be days later. Is that sufficient, or does it have to be on site from that? Do you follow what
I do.
I mean, it's not the day they did the maintenance, but it is checked in and checked out, where some we can check in and check out on site. I know Sefco, I know Terry Herrera's system does that. Bucky's, they do a system. Bucky's does a sign in while we're on site that we sign a piece of paper, but we also do a dispatch ticket that we're able to close. So is a dispatch ticket sufficient as a log?
Again, this is a work in progress, guys. We are just trying to figure things out, flying as we go, and we will get there. So if that's what we're looking at as a log and it captures all of these components, and somebody shows up to say, hey, we want to see your log of information, and this is the report that you generate that shows that Adam was there and he left that pump at 12:14, then that'll work. That'll meet the requirements. If it doesn't say that, and it doesn't say your service company, all those requirements, not going to really meet the criteria of the log. But if you could generate a report or information that shows all of that, then I think we're going to be good. And again, we don't need to put those specifics in here. and we will, we're getting along to see how does this work, and then, manner as prescribed. So we'll just figure it out. So if y'all don't have anything else besides making sure we do clarify whose responsibility that is, I did remove the section C, and we will add an implementation date. I'm going to move on to the fraud awareness training. Nothing changed here. This was not up for amendment by you all. Nothing suggested last time around. I will add an implementation date to this one. It will probably go past January 1 to make sure we have ample time to develop a training process and provide that out to you all in a easy to disseminate manner for your employees to comply, for you and your
Yes.
employees to comply. Yes, sir.
Jason Harris, just real quick. I think in A, there's a extra word in there. It says on the third line, fraud awareness training required provided by the department. I think it's probably just supposed to be provided.
Okay.
Am I
Thank
wrong?
you. Nope,
Okay.
you're good. So perfect.
Jessica, just real quick,
Yes, sir.
Terry Maxey, are y'all are actually going to produce the training? Are you going to subcontract? I mean, there's people
No,
that do
we'll,
all this training and stuff already.
right. No, we'll probably work in conjunction with FCIC to produce a video and
Okay.
have it available either through our website, through their website. We'll find a secure place to put that training and make it available for free.
Okay, and then there needs to be good lead time on this. I mean, it's
Absolutely.
not going to be, March 1st, 24. So, I mean, you've got to have from whatever time it becomes available. I mean, there's a lot of clerks out there,
Right. Yes. So we'll work on this one. Like I said, this one will go beyond January 1. It'll probably be later. And so that one we will build in a better cushion for this rule.
Yeah, my opinion is it'd be like a year. Within a year, we'd have every clerk trained on fraud awareness or something to that
Okay.
effect. It's just a suggestion. So.
Okay.
Jessica, sorry, me again. I see we have Class A and Class C operators identified there. Is there a reason we
Right.
left B out?
There is not, but we can certainly add them in.
Yeah, I don't. A and B are typically clumped together,
Okay.
but just like that, that's perfect.
Got it. Mr. Skurlock.
Thank you. This will be quick and probably not on task or topic, but Mary mentioned, and I actually was thinking the same thing. If FCIC could put together a 2-minute, this is what you do and this is who you contact for the less than cooperative, smaller law enforcement agencies, if there is a skimmer found, and I think I certainly understand wanting to get those dispensers back up and going, and certainly in a small station environment. But if there was something on the website that they could, someone could direct them to as a law enforcement official, and just say, hey, this is what you need to do, and this is where this goes, and they need a case number. I think that would be great. And just if you could add that to your training list, I would love that.
Yes, sir. We can certainly do that. And of course, Adam and his staff are continuing to have training and conduct training across the state. And that's actually part of our exceptional item request for funding for them. It would be an increase in their travel budget so they can get across Texas and continue to train local law enforcement and prosecutors. So we will add that. We'll look at that as to where the best place would be for that to live. But again, continued communications and outreach, going out through the Municipal Police Officers Association. There's the FOP, and so there's various outlets, so we can certainly communicate that information. That's a great idea. So we'll share that. Absolutely. So if we're ready to move on, the remainder, so we didn't have any changes there. 9759 goes to what we discussed earlier in section 9730 and having that 72 hours, changing without the directions. So anything that was in 9730 will be mirrored here in 9759. So that's the note here. Those will be mirrored. So I don't have any more specifics here. And the remainder of the changes are just to let you know they are formalities. That's correcting a clerical error that was there previously. And this is standardizing to our other rules. These are all the repeals of the previous OAG rules. So nothing's changing. A lot of those came into these new rules, or we got rid of them because they were those overly burdensome punitive rules that did not exactly work for industry. So that's what I've got. And I've noted all the changes requested on this document, and I will work to make those so that they align with your intent.
Thank you, Jessica. Any other questions, comments about the draft rule language? Okay, then I need a motion to approve the rules, given the edits we've made today, for publishing in the Texas Register.
Motion, Terry Maxey.
Second, Terry Hara.
Thank you, gentlemen. Delia, will you do the roll call vote on these rules?
Yes, sir. Keisha Esqueda,
Approve.
Terry Maxey,
Yes.
Nathan Winkleman,
Approve.
Terry Hara,
Approved.
Zeth Stevens,
Approved.
Adam Thompson,
Approve.
and presiding officer Jason Harris.
Approved.
Motion passes.
Thank you, ma'am. Again, thanks to everybody. All valuable opinions. Again, we're going to get other bites at the apple on this. We're now able to get the project started and moving on down the road, so appreciate that. With respect to future board meetings, did anyone have any recommended agenda items or things that they would like to have discussed in a future meeting?
Jason, just for, just a footnote thing, I think as we get progressing on this into next year, we'll have to really look at this thing about leased locations. If you think about 7-Eleven's business model and some of these other ones, there are many, many locations of the 15,000 stores in Texas, whatever. Many of those are operated by people that do not own the property. In the TCEQ, probably 10 years ago, we eventually came to a realization and worked with them to revise language to hold, the operator of the property responsible for things like logs and, complying with law enforcement and things like that. I mean, I think we just need to be able to maybe at some point illustrate to the department that the registration person is not necessarily the same person that is going to be able to be there complying. And I don't think we need to solve everything today, but I did ask some of my colleagues in Austin to look up that language that we used, and it's not that that the department is going to go off and trample on an operator necessarily, but it just helps to sort of lubricate the transaction when you can tell someone that's leasing a property hundreds of miles away that you are in violation of the law if you do not do these things. That is wholly different than putting it in a lease or something like that. And we crossed this bridge with a lot of TCEQ things many years ago, and something that I will maybe look for at some point in the future. But anyway,
Appreciate that, Terry. So I just want to be clear, that's in reference to the proposed rules and the changes to the rules, not necessarily an additional agenda item to discuss.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it
Okay, yeah.
may be an agenda item I would nominate somewhere down the road, but
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Presiding Officer Harris, top of mind for the next meeting would be, of course, taking a look at the public comments that come out of this publishing. We have an approximate date of publishing, and then she will take the time to review all of the public comments that come in and prepare them to be digested by this group. And the board will then, take a look at this again with whatever's come through based on our public comment. Again, everyone here can also do that. So that will be the main item moving forward. But we also need time for that to be published and for Jess to review, and it will come back to the board.
Right. My anticipation will be probably the beginning of May. So we probably will not send to publish until the middle of March. And then we've got our 30-day comment period. We would send it, and it's a couple weeks before it's actually published. So we probably will meet again at the beginning of end of April, beginning of May.
Fantastic, thank you. But when we do get closer to that deal, we'll pull everybody. Schedule it, the time and date.
Yes, we will pull the board.
All right, I think our business is done. I will announce that we're adjourning the meeting.
All right. Great job, Jason. Thank you, Jessica. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Appreciate your time.
Great work.